Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of season 1 of our podcast, Law That Leads. We are here with Sehr Mahmood today, who is a real estate broker, an investor, and an active philanthropist. She's the founder and CEO of My Condo Source, which is one of the country's top platinum pre-construction real estate teams and has been a licensed broker since 2012. She consistently sells between 400 to 500 condos a year, and in the last 5 years, she has sold more than $1 billion in real estate to clients while amassing a personal investment portfolio of 19 properties, which is pretty impressive. When she's not traveling the world with the industry's top developers or attending the latest launch events, she's either at the gym, completing a double hit workout, or donating time and resources to a number of animal rescue organizations. Last year, she ran an event in Mexico, which provided free spays and neuters to 137 homeless dogs and cats. She regularly brings back and coordinates the flights for rescue animals from the Caribbean countries who have a forever home waiting in Canada. One dog, who now goes by the full name of Pablo Escobar, arrived in April and found a special place in Sahir's heart. He's now a regular on her social media. Having moved to Canada in 2003 to study here, with no context or experience whatsoever, Sehr hopes her success helps inspire immigrants, women, realtors, and entrepreneurs, and shows them that anyone can build a life beyond their wildest dreams if they are focused on their goals and work relentlessly to achieve them.
I am your host. My name is Paola Becci. I am a partner here at ALF LLP, which is a full-service firm and practices a number of areas of law. We are here at the headquarters of ALF LLP, where we will be joined by industry professionals each month to discuss cutting-edge legal insights and in-depth discussions all related to law. Whether you are a seasoned lawyer, a business owner, a student, or simply curious about the law, our podcast is designed to equip you with invaluable insights and actionable knowledge on emerging legal trends and real-world scenarios. So, subscribe now and save the 17th of each month for new episodes of Law That Leads, along with our growing community. In the interim, connect with us on social media for updates and exclusive content. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook at ALF LLP. You may also listen to us on Spotify, and if you are like me, who loves to listen to podcasts on my long drives, please tune in and, more importantly, drive safe.
So, without further ado, welcome Sehr. Hi, Sehr.
Hi, Paola. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, we're so happy you're here today.
It's a pleasure.
And we're so happy to discuss condos because I guess everyone is just talking about condos these days. So you've been in the business for quite a while now, and pre-construction is sort of your bread and butter. And I'm sure you've seen the industry change. What have you noticed are trends in the recent market?
So there's two different things. So first of all, in this fall, we had a big surge in the amount of launches that we had in pre-construction. I think we had about 42 launches this fall.
Wow,
so it was very, very high. And there's two factors that are driving that. They come down to supply and demand. So on the supply side, we're definitely not building enough housing in the city of Toronto, in the GTA, or even in the province of Ontario. So the provincial government actually set a mandate last year to build 1.5 million new homes over the course of the next 10 years. But if you look at the last 10 years, they've only built 669,000. So they didn't even meet half of that target.
Oh, okay.
So when you look at it, I mean, there's not more land being built. The red tape on the government level has not been reduced. And it's not like we have new technology to build faster. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to actually meet those targets. So that's the first thing. Now, the second is demand. We have, Canada has an aging population and a workforce that's growing older and older. And the way that they've set to replace that is by bringing in record immigration.
Right.
So, there's another mandate to have 1.5 million new immigrants over the course of the next 3 years. And when you look at last year alone, we added 1 million new Canadians to the country. Now, some of those people are already here, but a lot of those people were being brought in from outside. So a lot of that demand is being fueled by these new people coming into the country.
Right.
So when you add that to the fact that pricing of detached is up, you see that, condos are the next level that people are able to find attainable in terms of pricing. So you're seeing that surge in demand, which has led to that surge in pre-con projects and the success of pre-con projects, because pre-con projects have been selling over the last 4 years extremely well. I would say even up till the last maybe 2 months or so, sales were happening very rapidly. There's been a slowdown for sure that I've seen in the last 2 months with all the rate hikes that have been going on.
Exactly.
But it's part of the market cycle. Now, what this leads to and what I expect to happen is that, normally we have about 21,000 pre-construction sales every single year. 2021 was a record number of sales. It was about 30,000 pre-construction sales.
Wow.
So to give you a comparison, this year we have about 10,000. So we're half of what we're normally at. Now, why is this a factor that's going to play into the future? Because we're also expecting to see 10,000 next year. So we're expecting half this year, half next year, and you're not really going to see that effect till 2027, 2028. Because the way that it plays out is that these projects were supposed to be delivered, like launched this year, sold this year, and then delivered in 2027.
Right.
So now, when you have that slowdown where projects are only 20 to 30% sold, keep in mind these projects need to be about 70% sold to get to the bank financing level. So these projects are going to get started. Construction is going to start later. They're going to finish later. A lot of builders are actually now holding off sales and saying, we'll relaunch next year if the economic conditions are better. They're waiting and watching. Some projects ended up getting canceled. So we're seeing that there's going to be a shortage come into play, but that ripple effect isn't going to be seen until 2027, 2028. So when you say that there's a surge of pre-con launches, we actually need that surge, because even though the sales aren't there today, this is a temporary economic environment, and we're still going to keep seeing that shortage in the future, because our economy at the end of the day still needs that housing.
Exactly. And I'm so happy you brought the immigration side of this into the conversation, because we do practice immigration law, but also most of us in this office, we're not born and raised in Canada. We actually talk about this in the previous episodes as well.
Yeah.
So we understand the difference of moving to a new country, having your idea of what it takes to purchase a home or a condo sort of in a different area of the world, and now you're in Canada, but it's a completely different ball game. And because we specialize in first-time home buyers, but also first-time community living home buyers, which is a completely beast on its own, have a lot more to offer to the clients, because we're actually able to understand their mentality of how they're, or what their experience has been in purchasing a home outside of Canada. And we're able to compare that to the clients and say, yes, you might be used to this type of a system, but here in Canada, either that doesn't exist, or it's done differently, or there's this new thing that doesn't exist where you're coming from. So doing that comparison, especially for first-time home buyers in Canada, is almost crucial to the entire deal. You probably get this question a lot, but I guess with pre-construction, one of the beauty of it is receiving the APS. And for those of you that are just tuning in, APS is short for Agreement of Purchase and Sale. It's a very lengthy document, which can be scary to look at if you've never purchased a home before.
Definitely.
And so we routinely review APSs on behalf of clients, but I think we're sort of the last to come on to look at it. Whereas you'd be the first person to advise the client and say, you're going to be receiving the APS now that you provided your deposit, and now you have 10 days to go to counsel and figure out if this is the right deal for you. So what do you say to the clients as the first point of contact? And then I guess sub to that would be, what do you wish that the lawyer would say after you've sent the clients to the lawyer?
That's a great question. I definitely think that pre-construction is its own niche. So while there are 80,000 real estate agents in Toronto, there's very few. I would say there's about 200 that are specializing in pre-construction. It's a very, very small market. So I think it's very important for buyers to work with an agent who is specializing in pre-construction, who understands it on a high level, who understands these agreements and can explain them to you, who's been through that process and knows it in and out. The pre-construction agreements, like you mentioned, are 100 to 200 pages long, whereas the resale contracts are 5 pages long. So there's a lot more that goes into it. Now, the way that we prepare our clients is that we actually do a Zoom call or an in-person meeting every time that a deal is signed, and we go through the agreement in great depth. We explain to them, what the clauses are. We show them where the amendments lie, because a lot of the amendments are at the back of the agreement, some of them are in the front. So they'll look at their deposit structure and they'll be like, this is not what you sent me. But they're missing an amendment on page 76 that has a new deposit structure. So, we explain to them that what's in the actual agreement is being superseded by the amendments, things like that. We explain to them what is Terion. We go through the process of occupancy and how all that works. So we go through all those first steps, make sure that they really understand in depth what they're getting themselves into. We give them the opportunity to ask us questions, and then we always refer them to a lawyer so they can go to the next step and have it professionally done again and go through the cost element of it and so forth. Now, we always do advise them that, again, pre-construction is a different niche even for lawyers. A lot of regular resale lawyers don't know how to read pre-construction contracts, and we run into this many times. They don't know how to, they don't know what's normal and what's not. They ask for things that are a little bit out of whack sometimes, and the builder will just say flat out no. It leads to a lot of rift. So we always say it's very important to work with a pre-construction lawyer who fully understands the agreement, understands, how to protect you, but at the same time what's normal, and differentiate between those two. It's very important for the buyer to ask questions, of course, but at the same time set that expectation of what they're getting themselves into, and then they can ultimately decide if it's right for them or not.
And I'm so glad you highlighted that, because it's very, very important to, when you're purchasing pre-construction, that you go to a lawyer that has extensive experience in that area. So Sahara knows this, but for you that are just tuning in, because I have been practicing condominium litigation for so many years, I'm almost able to pinpoint the common denominators between the clients that purchased a unit, never lived in a condo before, never lived in community living before, and now they're in a situation that requires to go into litigation. With ALF, what we're doing different is every time there's a condominium purchase, I'm always on the file. I'm always looped in by our team. And the reason for that is because it could either be pre-construction, but it could also be resale. And now you have, while you might not have the lengthy APS agreement, now you have governing documents. You have a declaration. You have bylaws. You have rules. And almost always there's going to be a client that's purchasing a condominium unit that is not right for them. For example, dogs. We had a client that had a fairly large dog and was trying to move into this condominium unit. And either the governing documents will say no pets, or you cannot have a dog that's over 20 pounds. But for someone that has never lived in a condo before, and now you're going to a real estate lawyer that only deals in resale real estate, they wouldn't even know where to begin to look for that specific rule or that specific bylaw in the governing documents. They're focusing on, is title being transferred properly, or, sort of the transactional real estate details that you need to have, but not necessarily the details that you would need, particularly in a condominium. So this is the reason why we started the unique package, as you know, of added due diligence, where I will be sitting with the client prior to even looking at anything else that needs to be done on the transactional side, but I will be sitting with them, going through the governing documents, or, now there's stuck houses too. So that's community living, but not necessarily high rise, which is also very different in itself. And we'll be going through all of that to make sure that the client fully understands what they're walking into, because once the deal is done, and then these problems arise, you have no other option but to go to litigation, because you can talk to the board as much as you want, you can try to figure it out, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to go to litigation, and it's not a pretty place to be. I've represented homeowners in the past where they've spent upwards of $60,000 and nothing has been resolved.
Exactly. It takes so much time and mental energy.
Exactly. And I think the mental aspect, like the draining that litigation takes out of you is, money cannot replace that.
Right.
It's
a few extra gray hairs.
Exactly. So, and I guess that brings us to our next part of the conversation. So when it is a first-time home buyer and also a first-time community living buyer, what do you wish that the lawyer would highlight for them when they sort of begin this process?
In the pre-con industry, us agents joke that deals die when they go to the lawyer, because a lot of the clients are using the resale lawyers that they've been using for the last 20 years. No, my Uncle Tim is going to do this contract. So, and they don't really know what to expect because it's their first time going into pre-construction. And then what ends up happening is that the lawyer will say, oh, well, there's all these costs associated with them, which is normal in pre-construction. But if you've never seen them before, I feel like a lot of these lawyers are out there to attack the agreement and show value by saying, let me go and get all of this removed. Now, in pre-construction, what we focus on is getting clients in that first round of sales when they have the best pricing, the best incentives. You're getting, the first choice on inventory. So there's a lot of benefits in buying in that round. And a lot of times, if you don't get that unit, they have a lineup of 13 other people who are willing to take that suite. So when your lawyer comes back with a laundry list of items to remove, a lot of the times the builder just turns around and says no to 12 of those 13 items. And then the lawyer has not set that expectation that, this is actually normal and this is how it goes. Now the buyer is thinking, oh my God, we asked for all these things that were added to the agreement that were not supposed to be there, and now my lawyer can't remove them. I think this is a bad deal. I wish that the lawyers would explain to them that, these contracts have been pretty standard for 50 years. Like Menkes has been in the industry for 70 years. They've sold thousands of units with this exact same contract. They're not in the business of trying to dupe people and take something out they're not supposed to. These agreements are drafted by very reputable companies, like the biggest in the industry, and they've been using them for decades. So yes, let's attempt to reduce some of those charges, but not to set that expectation that everything should be gone. And I think if they could just explain that part a little bit better, rather than here's what needs to be removed. Oh, builder came back and said no, and now I'm emotionally upset, so I cancel my deal.
Exactly.
So that process of just explaining what's normal and what's not, and what the expectation should be versus what we're going to ask for. Because you can ask for everything, but just set that expectation. Now, a lot of times when we're selling, like I said, they are buying in that first round. So just explaining the advantage of maybe getting in early, because all the units that I've purchased, I've purchased 20 units in pre-construction so far. By the time that it's built, do I have 40,000 in levies and costs? Sure, but a lot of the times the units have gone up by 150,000.
Exactly.
So it's like, sir, would you be okay with 110,000 in profit rather than the 150 that you thought you were going to get? Most people will say yes. So just explaining that process a little bit better, that it's not the end all, when you have that, because there's a lot of advantages to pre-construction. It's a way that I built equity over the years without being a landlord, without having to get a mortgage, dealing with interest rates. You put your deposits and you sit back and you wait for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. It's a very passive way of investing. And in most cases, people do very well. Now, the caveat is right now, people who bought in 2019, 2021 who are closing now, they're experiencing a little bit of difficulty. But it's important for buyers to understand that the market moves in cycles. So when they bought in those years, it was a very low interest rate environment. And now we have a high interest rate environment, prices are down. So interest rates are high. But if you can just get through this cycle of real estate, prices do pretty much double every 10 years if you can ride it out. So don't buy with that, notion of I'm going to sign this in 3 years and make a lot of money. If you can buy with that notion that I'm not going to be a day trader, I'm going to be a decade trader, I'm going to buy and hold, you'll always come out on the winning side.
Wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think that's the fine balance that we've been able to tune here at ALF, is that when someone comes to us with a pre-construction deal, obviously the transactional side of the real estate is not going to take place, as you said, 3 years, 4 years, whatever the timeline is. It's very important for them to understand the agreement of from this point in time, not let's look at the agreement 3 years from now and how it's going to go together. So I understand the lawyer side, but I also understand it as a buyer because I've been on those shoes myself. And I've also been a director at a condo. I've also, I understand condos from all sides that you could think of. Right. And the reason for that is because I've been in those shoes.
Right.
And I think that's the difference between our condominium lawyers here at ALF and other real estate lawyers is that we're able to differentiate for the clients the difference between not only just highlighting what the risks of the agreement is and sort of focusing on that, but also saying, yes, this is an agreement. It might sound scary because you've never done this before, but it is very standard in the industry. And then you'll sort of have another opportunity when it does close or interim occupancy comes, and before final closing happening, for you to understand a little bit more of how that has changed over time.
Yes.
And now you're going to be living in there temporarily through interim occupancy. And then when the final closing happens, again, it's sort of another step. So I think with us, it's very important for us to explain the steps that are taking place. And it's not like resale where, like you said, you review the 5-page offer and then you have the closing, the house is yours, you move in and it's done. Whereas with pre-construction, there's essentially a 3-step process.
Right.
So I think for all the first-time home buyers, if they understand what each process entails, then it's much more comfortable for them to know they've made the right decision. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Outlining all the risks of the agreement and focusing on that is always going to kill the deal.
Yeah, a few years ago, they changed the contract. The first page has to say, the first line is, this project may be canceled. So people see that and they're like, oh my God, this project may be canceled. But I'm like, that's in every agreement now. It has to be on that first page, but it freaks people out. So just letting them understand that this is like, there's a law there that says this has to be there. Exactly. It's not that it's just specific to this builder.
Right, exactly. And really that's the difference. Yeah. And then with our first-time home buyers who just moved to Canada, we also go in a little bit deeper with our either the consultation or whatever part of the 3-step process we're in. We go a little bit deeper to explain that having an apartment in Europe or having an apartment unit somewhere else in the world, it's much different than owning a condominium unit in Canada because it makes a huge difference. And I think once people understand that difference, it's also much easier for them to go through the process with a different mentality and outlook. And the other part, as you know, we have our app. So with the app, it does really streamline everything. So when a pre-construction deal comes in, it's not just us in the conversation. You'd be in the conversation. Someone else would be in the conversation. Mortgage broker. It's sort of everybody. We're all under one roof. And then we're able to send documents, sign from the comfort of their home, but there's still a certificate with an IP address. Talking about things of the transactional side at the beginning of the pre-construction deal, it's really not helpful to anybody. Because it could be 3 to 4 years down the line. You could even also be discussing things that might not even be relevant to the deal at all until final closing comes along. So, it really is important to have that conversation of each little step and then also looking at it from the client's perspective. Not treating everybody as they've owned 3 to 4 homes and now they know what it's all about. Some things
really
might
customizing that experience.
Exactly, because something might, I always say this, but something might be common sense for one client, but it's not for another. And it has nothing to do with, it's just all purely on where they come from, what their previous experiences is. And I think that really needs to be highlighted in the process. So I guess we'll get more onto the business side of the conversation. So as a female CEO and a broker, what are some challenges that you faced in the real estate industry or pre-construction real estate industry, to be specific?
Well, there's the old adage that we're in a man's world, and it's true even in pre-construction. So if you look at who all the top performers are, it's mainly male dominated. There's very few women who are there at the top. So I think for me, it's about like, I take that as rather than a challenge, as an opportunity. And I, as in any other industry, whether it's banking and finance and law or so forth, how do you differentiate yourself and really set yourself apart? So I've used that to my advantage because, now when I go to presentation centers or, when I build that success, it gives me that opportunity to be invited to podcasts like this, being invited to speaking events, because now I actually find that it's easier for me to stand out in that industry because I'm such a minority within it. So I've used it to my advantage to bring light to causes that I am deeply passionate about, such as animal welfare, charities that I'm helping. And then taking the fact that I'm an immigrant and that I'm a woman and inspiring a lot of other people. So I have a lot of people that reach out to me and say, oh, I want to get my real estate license. I'm new to Canada. Can you guide me? So I really take that element of being a female to help others, inspire others. And it gives me that level of satisfaction that I wouldn't be able to get if I wasn't a woman. So I look at it like, sometimes do clients want to work with a male instead? Sure. Do I have less males wanting to work for me and they want to join other teams? There are more guys, of course. But I also look at the positive, and I feel that the impact that I can make being a woman outweighs the negatives. So I use it to my advantage.
Yeah, and of course, I agree with you. It's the same in our industry. And I guess that brings us to the next conversation where, there are these powerful women who dominate a male-dominated industry in their own unique way, as you said, and then go on and build these great companies on their own. So for you, when you did that and you began and you started My Condo Source, what was your vision when you started it? And are you sort of on time, late, in terms of what you have achieved so far and what's left from that vision that you initially had?
When I first started my career, I did 100 leases my first year, and I did 100 sales the second year. And then I started to take that to 200 sales a year by myself with no staff, no help. So Condo Source is very organic for me. I was reaching those high levels of success. But then I started to realize that, I'm capped out, which was that 200 deal a year mark. How can I grow from there? So I'm not going to say that I had like a business plan of like, let's build My Condo Source. It kind of happened organically. I've been taking business coaching throughout my career. And I said, how can I take this to the next level? How do I take that same 24 hours in a day and elevate that where I'm only now doing what I do best and having somebody else do the rest? So I started to bring on agents. I started to bring on support staff. And as my business grew, my relationships with developers grew, the team also grew and the brand started to grow. So now, that's where I'm at. I want to, obviously, there's still a lot of challenges. There's still a lot of, things and rifts that need to be ironed out, as any business would be. But I'm working on that, and I'm seeing like what challenges do we have every day and how can I add to make it better. Hopefully one day make it like a household name, like people think of Remax and Keller Williams for resale. Hopefully people think of My Condo Source for pre-construction.
Exactly. And I think you're already there.
Thank you.
In the pre-construction industry, obviously your name comes up all the time. So and that's why we're really glad that you're here today. There is a lot of respect for you in the industry.
Oh, thank you so much.
And of course, women have to stick together.
Yeah, and I hope to keep elevating that brand and bringing more value to clients, other agents, and so forth.
Exactly. So I think it's
and hopefully we can collaborate in the future as well on future deals. I'd love that.
Of course. And I think with the pre-construction industry, it's never going to die in Canada. I think it's like I think it's the number one thing that sets Canada apart from other real estate industries in other areas of the world.
Definitely.
Because looking back, when I was growing up, you never thought of buying a home from a piece of paper that didn't even exist yet.
Right.
The risks associated with that and all of that. It also is very culturally. So what may be a cultural norm in one country is not in another. So I think it is a very Canadian.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are. So Sehr, thank you so much for coming again. I feel like we had a very organic and amazing conversation.
Yeah, it was great.
And I hope that all of our listeners sort of come out of this with understanding pre-construction condominium a little bit better from both the real estate agent side and the lawyer side. And for those of you that are interested in a pre-construction purchasing a pre-construction condominium unit, then how would everybody reach to you, Seher?
You can go to our website, www.mycondosource.com. Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well, @mycondosource.
This podcast is brought to you by ALF LLP. Save the 17th of each month for new episodes of Law That Leads. Connect with us on social media for updates and exclusive content. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook at ALF LLP.